Hello everybody, MattmanXD here for another video. And now if there's one game that I would easily put in my top 6, it would be Hollow Knight. Hollow Knight is an amazing game with great exploration, platforming and combat, and most of all, amazing bosses. Now these bosses I thought deserved their whole entire video dedicated to them. So today we'll be ranking the top 10 bosses. Now the main factor that I've put into ranking them is how fun and how essential they were to playing the game the first time around. So not in the Pantheons, which is like the boss rush area, mostly in the actual game. Now I am a good gamer, but I'm not a god gamer. So some of the hardest challenges like Nightmare King Grim and Pure Vessel, I'm sorry, but they'll be missing out. In the number 10 spot, we have the Traitor Lord. Now, the Traitor Lord is one of the most overlooked bosses. He's definitely not like top 3 material, but this boss is definitely a good boss. He's in the Queen's Gardens, which is most likely one of the last areas you visit. And what I like about him so much is how he forces you to use your newly acquired item, the Shade Dash. Now the Shade Dash can dash through things without taking damage, and if you do not use this Shade Dash, you will absolutely be destroyed. And that's why I found this boss particularly enjoyable, because he just forced me to get used to that Shade Dash and use it. It's a very fun boss and a great challenge. Now, he's not too particularly interested in the attacks department. His attacks are quite simple, and also if you know how to use the Shade Dash, it's quite a cakewalk. But it's still a great number 10, but just not amazing. In number 9 we have Hornet. This boss was so good that she got her whole sequel that's still yet to release. Now, when I say Hornet, I'm thinking of the first fight, mostly because the first fight for me was a lot more enjoyable, because there's more of an incentive to fight her, otherwise you can't progress. She's a much more difficult and enjoyable boss. She has quite varied attacks, and for me, it felt like this was an essential boss that got me more ready and used to the combat, and overall probably the best tutorial boss in the game. Well done for the 9th spot. Lurien the Dreamer, out of all 3 Dreamers, is the easiest one to get to. So that's why they put one of the harder bosses in front of her. At number 8, we have the Watcher Knights. Now these knights, there's quite a few of them, will definitely give you some trouble the first time around, as they did to me. One of your biggest goals is to get more power-ups and more mask shards to be able to overcome this fearsome challenge. And that's what I really like about it. Their attacks aren't too varied, but because you're fighting more than one at a time and they're rolling all over the place, they're a great challenge. A bit more on the forgettable side, but a perfect challenge in your way to overcome. Now let's move on to the next one before I say challenge it yet another time. Sad backstory? Check. Difficult attacks? Check. Great soundtrack? Check. Number 7 goes to the final boss of the game, the Hollow Knight. This guy has everything on his sides. He's definitely not that easy, he is quite difficult. And if you get more and more items, you'll be rewarded with an easier fight. All his attacks are so great for the boss, but he truly shines in the story, as you can see him fighting the infection, and even staying himself to give the knight, the character you play as an edge. He's truly a tragic boss fight. The only spots he falls flat in is his actual attacks, which I found a little bit more on the basic side, but the story makes up for that. Number 6 goes to the fan favourite, Mantis Lords. These three are basically the textbook example of how to do a great boss. It starts off with a tricky challenge, but the attacks are clearly telegraphed and it's a fair challenge. And then it proceeds to up the ante by fighting 2 of these mantises at once. It truly is a really fun boss, and I understand why everyone loves it, including me. Now, number 6 may seem a bit low, but I don't enjoy these bosses as much as others. I do think their attacks are a little bit simplistic, although I get that's some of the point, and personally I find them a lot easier than most. But still, that's nothing to undercut their amazing boss battle. 10 out of 10. The Pantheons in the final DLC add quite a few new bosses, although there's none more overlooked than my number 5, Paintmaster Shio. Now this guy, first of all, for a Pantheon boss, he's quite easy and he doesn't have too many attacks, but he makes up for it in the sheer imaginative design. It is such a cool concept to see a boss using his paintbrush to do an assortment of coloured attacks. You have to memorize what each colour does, and all attacks are fun to dodge, and through the entire fight I just had a smile on my face. He may not be the best challenge if you're looking for some of the harder bosses, but he is just a pure joy. Number 4 goes to Troop Master Grimm. Now hold up. I am really good at the game, but I'm not amazing god gamer material. That's why most put the much harder variant, Nightmare King Grimm, instead of this guy. But for me, this was the perfect challenge. It was a great boss that I really enjoyed. It was a good challenge, but he has clear telegraphed attacks that are fun to master. He also has one of the best songs in the entire game to back it up. Most people find Nightmare King Grimm to be the hard boss that they're looking for, but for me, I enjoyed Troop Master Grimm as that challenge. This is just personal preference, but this is an amazing boss and truly deserving of the 4th spot. On my first playthrough, there was almost no boss that I struggled on as much as the Soul Master. While when you're in late game with all the Pantheons and that, this guy becomes quite a pushover. Early game when you first fight him, it is truly a magical moment. The music, the battle, the setting, it is truly a phenomenal boss and a great challenge to overcome. This is one of the bosses I remember the most, and that's why it is so high up in the 3rd spot. While others may put maybe his Dream variant above because it's harder, I personally like this boss just because of the sheer memorability and impact it had. At number 2, we have my personal favourite Pantheon boss, Nailmaster's Oro and Mato. What an amazing, spectacular boss fight. This just came completely out of nowhere, since in the main game, these guys help you get nail arts, and now I have to fight them. First of all, it tricks you into being an easy boss. You get used to his ridiculous long range that you have to be very careful of, and you get used to his different attacks. But there is not a more surprising moment than when his brother Mato comes in and joins him. It is truly magical how they both work together to fight you, and it is a great challenge, especially when you use some of the Pantheon's bindings, specifically No Charms. What an amazing challenge, an amazing memorable moment from a spectacular boss. Now before we get onto the top pick, I do want to have some honourable mentions. First of all, we have Broken Vessel, a really fun boss but quite basic and quite easy. Dun Defender, same scenario, really easy, but it's Dun Defender. He's such a fun boss to fight. Next up we have Nightmare King Grimm and Pure Vessel. While these bosses are way too hard for me, I completely understand why so many enjoy them. And we also have Broody Morlock. JK, he dies in hell. Horrible boss. Now let's go on to our number 1. the Radiance. What a great, true final boss. After you beat the Hollow Knight, Dream Nail him, and going into this crazy challenge. This is the hardest boss I was able to complete, and boy was it an adventure. This boss feels like a perfect climax to the amazing game you've just had. It's tough, it's majestic, and most of all, it sums up an amazing story. This truly is one of the best final bosses in any game, and for me, my personal favourite boss. Well done, Radiance. I really hope that you enjoyed my list ranking my top 10 favourite Hollow Knight bosses. Now if you've seen any other list, this one is definitely quite different just because of my skill level and how I enjoyed the game personally. But honestly, all of these bosses I could see in any spots in the ranking. They're all super good, and I cannot wait for Hollow Knight Silksong. And from Mattman XD, goodbye!